The cafe smelled of burnt espresso and rain-soaked coats. The kind of place where strangers confess things they hadn't planned to say out loud. She said it calmly, almost politely, as if she were asking for extra sugar. I need a husband by tomorrow. Her fingers trembled around the cup, betraying the calm in her voice. I laughed first, short, stupid, defensive, because people don't say things like that unless they're joking or breaking. She didn't smile. She looked at me like someone standing at the edge of a bridge looks at the water below, already counting the seconds. Then you'll have to live at my place, I replied before my brain could catch up with my mouth. The sentence landed between us with a soft thud, heavier than it sounded. Her eyes widened, not with shock, but with calculation. She studied my face the way lawyers study contracts, searching for hidden clauses, loopholes, intent. Outside, a bus hissed to a stop, spraying rainwater across the curb. Inside, everything went quiet. I don't cook, she said at last. I don't mind, I said. It was true. I barely cook myself. I have rules, she added. So do I? She nodded, as if we just agreed on a business merger, instead of an arrangement that would rewrite 2 lives overnight. My name is Mira, she said, and this isn't romantic. Good, I said. Romance complicates things. We shook hands across the table like professionals, our palms warm and human, and suddenly too aware of each other. That was how it began, without flowers, without promises, without even illusion of love. Just 2 people deciding to be each other's solution. On the walk to my apartment, she told me the bare minimum. A family that believed marriage cured everything. An inheritance tied to a ring and a signature. A deadline that did not care about feelings. She did not tell me who had hurt her, or how badly, or why her voice hardened whenever she mentioned home. I didn't ask. Some truths asked to be earned. My apartment was small, but clean. A couch that doubled as a bed for guests. Shelves crowded with books I meant to read someday. A window that looked out over a brick wall painted with fading murals. She set her bag down and walked the space like an inspector, opening cabinets, testing the lock on the door, counting windows. We'll need photos, she said. Proof. Tomorrow? Tonight, she corrected. They won't believe a wedding without history. So we created one. We took pictures in bad lighting and worse angles. Her head leaning against my shoulder, my arm awkwardly around her waist. We laughed at the ridiculousness of it. The forced smiles, the way the camera caught truth even when we tried to fake it. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th photo, the laughter softened. The air changed. It became easier to stand close. We ordered takeout and ate on the floor. She told me she liked thunderstorms and hated lilies. I told her I wrote lists when I couldn't sleep and never finished them. At midnight, she asked where she would sleep. The bed, I said. I'll take the couch. She shook her head. If anyone asks, we share. That's part of the story. So we lay on opposite edges of the mattress, a respectful gulf of blankets between us. The ceiling fan hummed. The city breathed. I stared at the shadow of her eyelashes against her cheek and wondered when the arrangement would start feeling dangerous. In the morning, she wore my spare shirt and looked like she belonged there, which unsettled me more than anything else. We practiced answers over coffee, how we met, where, why it worked. She corrected my posture, softened my tone, taught me how to look at her like a man who had chosen, not been cornered. I learned quickly, too quickly. At the courthouse, the clerk barely glanced up. Names were spoken. Papers were signed. A ring, cheap, temporary, necessary, slid onto her finger. When it was my turn, my hand shook. When she took it, she squeezed, just once, a small anchor in a fast current. Smile, she whispered. We're winning. Winning felt heavier than losing ever had. By evening, messages poured in, congratulations, skepticism, relief. Her family wanted dinner. Tomorrow, she read the invitation twice and exhaled slowly. They'll test you, she said. They always do. I can handle tests, I said, hoping it was true. That night, we talked longer than planned. About her childhood house with the cracked steps. About my mother's laugh and the way it vanished when she was tired. We set boundaries with careful words and broke a few without noticing. At some point, the space between us disappeared. Our hands touched, lingered, withdrew. No one crossed a line, but we both saw it clearly now, glowing faintly like a warning sign. The next day, her family's dining room was all polished wood and polite smiles. Questions came sharp and sweet, layered with judgment. I answered with calm confidence I didn't know I possessed. Mira watched me like a hawk, correcting gently when I drifted, grounding me with a look when I rushed. When her uncle raised an eyebrow at our timeline, she slipped her arm through mine, natural as breathing. "He chose me," she said simply. The room shifted. Power, I realized, was contagious. On the drive home, she was quiet. "You did well," she said eventually. "Better than well." "Part of the job," I replied. She turned to me then, searching my face again, but this time without calculation. "This was supposed to be simple," she said. "Temporary." I nodded. "It still can be." Her smile was sad, and something else I couldn't name. I don't think we're good at simple. That night, the storm came. Rain drummed against the windows. The lights flickered. We stood in the kitchen, close, the air tight with words we weren't saying. When the power went out, she laughed, startled, and reached for me by instinct. I steadied her, my hands warm on her arms, her breath fast against my chest. "This is still pretend," she said more to herself than to me. "Is it?" I asked softly. She didn't answer. She stepped back. The space returned between us like a tide pulling away from shore. But her eyes lingered, and mine followed, and the unspoken agreement we'd made in a cafe began to strain under the weight of everything it had become. The rain didn't stop when the power came back on. It softened, turned patient, as if it had all the time in the world to wait us out. Mira moved first, busying herself with wiping the counter that wasn't dirty, aligning the mugs that were already straight. I watched her from the doorway, aware of how quickly she had learned the geography of my apartment, how naturally she filled its silences. "We should set rules," she said, not looking at me. "New ones." "Addendums to the contract?" I asked, trying to sound light. "Yes." She finally met my eyes. Like, no surprises. I almost laughed. Our entire arrangement was a surprise wrapped in paperwork. But I nodded. No surprises. We slept back to back that night, a careful truce of warmth and distance. I woke before dawn to the sound of her crying quietly. Face turned into the pillow, shoulders shaking as if she were trying to disappear into the mattress. I didn't touch her. I lay there, counting breaths, knowing that comfort offered too soon can feel like theft. When her breathing steadied, I closed my eyes and pretended I hadn't seen anything. Days passed. We found a rhythm that looked convincing from the outside and felt precarious within. We shared grocery lists, inside jokes, a calendar that filled too fast. She left notes on the fridge. "Don't forget the plumber. Dinner with my cousin," written in neat, decisive strokes. I started buying her favorite tea, without thinking. She began folding my shirts the way I liked them, sleeves tucked, edges aligned. People noticed. Friends who had never known me to commit raised eyebrows and smiled too long. Her mother called every evening, voice softening each time Mira handed the phone to me. "He's good for you," she said once, not as a question. I felt the weight of the lies settle deeper, heavier. One afternoon, I came home early to find her sitting on the floor of the bedroom, a small box open in her lap. Inside were letters tied with a ribbon, the paper yellowed, the ink uneven. She looked up, startled, guilt flashing across her face. "I wasn't snooping," she said quickly. "I was looking for tape." "It's okay," I said. "Those are old." "From someone you loved?" she asked, then winced. "You don't have to answer." I sat beside her, the carpet rough beneath my palms. "From someone I thought I would." She closed the box gently, as if tucking in a sleeping child. "I'm sorry." "Me too," I said, surprised to mean it in more ways than one. That evening, she cooked. It wasn't good. The sauce burned, the rice went mushy, and we laughed until our sides hurt, leaning against the counter like teenagers playing house. She wiped a smear of tomato from my cheek with her thumb and froze, hand hovering too long. I could feel the choice approaching, heavy and bright. The choice came faster than expected. It arrived in the form of a man at the door, tall, impeccably dressed, eyes sharp with history. He smiled at Mira with familiarity that made my jaw tighten. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. "Yes," I said too quickly. Myra's face went still. "This is our June," she said. "We used to work together," he finished smoothly. "On promises." He stepped inside without waiting, taking in the space, the photos, the ring on her finger. "Congratulations," he said. "I heard you married in a hurry." "We had reasons," Mira said. "I'm sure," he replied, gaze flicking to me. "And you are—" Her hand slid into mine, a reflex that felt earned and borrowed at the same time. "My husband." Arjun laughed softly. "Temporary solutions have a way of becoming permanent," he said, "especially when they're convenient." After he left, the apartment felt smaller. Mira paced. "He knows," she said. "He always knows." "About what?" "About leverage," she said. "He's here because the inheritance isn't the only thing at stake. There's a clause. If I'm married and living independently for 6 months, the board can't touch my shares." "6 months," I repeated. She nodded. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to trap you. I walked in willingly." I said, "But you should have told me." "I'm telling you now," she said, eyes bright. "If you want out." I shook my head. "No surprises." I reminded her gently. She laughed, brittle. "Right." We didn't sleep much that night. We talked instead, long and honest, peeling back layers we pretended weren't there. She told me about Arjun, about ambition mistaken for love. I told her about the letters, about leaving before being left. Somewhere between confessions, the fear shifted. It didn't disappear. It changed shape. Weeks later, a crack appeared in our careful facade. A photo leaked. Us at a market, her head thrown back in laughter, my hand at the small of her back. It wasn't staged. It was too true. Comments piled up, speculation bloomed, and with it, scrutiny. The board requested a meeting. Her mother asked questions that cut close to bone. "Are you happy?" she asked Mira over the phone. Mira looked at me, searching. "I am," she said slowly. "I think." The night before the meeting, the city went quiet in a way that felt like a held breath. We stood by the window, watching lights flicker on and off across the buildings. "If this works," she said, "everything changes. And if it doesn't, then we learn," she said. "And survive." I turned to her. "Mira." "Yes." "Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know this stopped being pretend for me." She didn't step away this time. She didn't rush, either. She reached up and rested her forehead against my chest, a small, fierce courage in the gesture. "For me, too," she said, voice steady despite the tremor I could feel. "That's what scares me." Outside, the rain began again, softer than before, as if the world were leaning in to listen, waiting to see which promises we would keep and which ones would cost us more than we were ready to pay. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and quiet intimidation. Mira sat straight back beside me, hands folded, ring catching the light every time she shifted. Across the table, faces arranged themselves into polite masks. People who smile with their mouths and measure with their eyes. Arjun was there, of course, leaning against the far wall as if he belonged everywhere at once. Questions came wrapped in courtesy. About strategy. About independence. About whether her recent decisions were influenced by personal circumstances. Mira answered with clarity and restraint, each word placed like a chess move. When they turned to me, I felt the weight of being an accessory suddenly become the weight of being accountable. "How involved are you in your wife's business affairs?" one of them asked. I glanced at Mira. She gave the slightest nod. "I'm involved in her life," I said. "I respect her work. I don't steer it." A pause. Pens tapped. Eyes flicked between us. "And your residence?" another asked. "You do live together?" "Yes," I said evenly, "by choice." That did something. The room shifted again, the way it had at her family's table. Power recognized conviction. After an hour, the meeting adjourned with smiles that meant very little and handshakes that meant just enough. In the hallway, Mira exhaled like she'd been holding her breath underwater. "You did it," she said. "We did," I corrected. Arjun caught up to us by the elevator. "Careful," he murmured to Mira, not bothering to lower his voice. Conviction has a way of rewriting intentions. She met his gaze without flinching. So does fear. The elevator doors closed on his smile. That night, exhaustion settled into our bones. We ate leftovers straight from the containers and sat on the floor, backs against couch. Mira traced a pattern on the carpet with her finger, thoughtful. "There's something else," she said. I waited. "My mother wants us to host a dinner," she continued. "At our place. She says it's time people saw us settled." "People?" I asked. "Family. Friends. Investors," she said. "Everyone." I laughed softly. "Of course." She looked at me, searching for reluctance, for resentment. "You don't have to." "I know," I said, "but I will." The dinner took on a life of its own in the days that followed. Guest lists grew. Expectations ballooned. Mira threw herself into preparations with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I watched her juggle menus and seating charts, calls and emails, all while pretending nothing was different. I started noticing the cracks. The way she went quiet when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her smile tightened when her mother's name lit up her phone. The night before the dinner, we were up late, folding napkins like it mattered. She dropped one, cursed under her breath, and then laughed, sharp, sudden, breaking. "I hate this," she said. "Then let's cancel," I said immediately. She shook her head. "No, I hate that it matters. I hate that I still want their approval." I took the napkin from her hands. "Wanting doesn't make you weak." She looked at me like she wanted to believe that. "You're good at this," she said quietly, "at standing your ground." "I learned the hard way," I said, "by not doing it sooner." The dinner arrived with clinking glasses and doorbells that didn't stop. Our apartment transformed. Chairs borrowed, lights softened, laughter layered over tension. Mira moved through the room like she was born a host, graceful and warm, touching arms, remembering names. I stayed close, a steady orbit. At some point, her mother pulled me aside. "She seems lighter," she said. "With you." I swallowed. "She is strong on her own." "Yes," she said, studying me, "but strength doesn't mean solitude." Later, Arjun appeared again, invited by someone who had known better or had known exactly what they were doing. He raised a glass, congratulated us loudly, and then leaned in close to me. "You know the clock," he said. 6 months. "I know," I replied. "Do you?" he asked. "Because lines blur, and when they do, people get hurt." I watched Mira laugh across the room, her eyes bright. "People get hurt either way." I said, "Some just choose honesty." The evening thinned. Guests left with hugs and promises. Dishes piled. Silence returned, fuller than before. Mira sank onto the couch, kicked off her shoes, and leaned her head back. "That was brutal," she said. "You were brilliant," I said. She turned to me. "Stay." "I live here," I said, smiling. "No," she said softly. "I mean, stay here." The air tightened again, familiar now. I moved closer, close enough to feel the warmth of her, the truth of her. She reached for my hand, laced our fingers together, grounding and electric. "We should talk about what happens after," she said. "After what?" "After the 6 months," she said. "If the board backs off, if the inheritance settles, and if it doesn't," she squeezed my hand. "Then we'll decide anyway." The words hung there, fragile and brave. I leaned in, stopping just short, giving her the space to choose. She closed the distance, slow and certain, and when our lips met, it wasn't fireworks. It was quiet. It was relief. It was the sound of a door opening somewhere deep inside both of us. We didn't rush. We didn't pretend this solved everything. We kissed like people who understood the cost and were willing to pay it one honest moment at a time. When we finally pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. "This changes things," she said. "Yes," I agreed, "but maybe not the way we're afraid of." She smiled then, real and unguarded. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent and alive. Inside, the future pressed close. Not as a deadline this time, but as a question we hadn't answered yet, one we would carry into the coming days, letting it unfold at its own dangerous, beautiful pace. The days after that kiss felt altered, like the city had shifted a few inches to the left, and no one else had noticed. Nothing dramatic changed on the surface. We still woke early, still shared the bathroom in careful turns, still discussed groceries and schedules. But under every ordinary moment ran a current that hadn't been there before, quiet and persistent. Mira became more deliberate. She listened longer before speaking, watched me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I caught myself doing the same, memorizing the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when thinking, the way her voice softened when she said my name. We didn't talk about the kiss again, not directly. It lived between us, unspoken but acknowledged, like a fragile object neither of us wanted to drop. At work, the pressure intensified. Meetings multiplied. Calls came late into the night. Myra's name appeared in articles, framed as a woman steadied by marriage, and each time she read those lines, her jaw tightened. One evening, she threw her phone onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. "They think you fixed me," she said. "I didn't," I replied. "I know," she said, "but I hate that they think I needed fixing." I sat beside her. "Then let's make sure they're wrong." She turned to me, something fierce and grateful flickering in her eyes. "You already are." Our June didn't disappear. He never did. He lingered on the edges, emails copied too widely, comments disguised as concern. One afternoon, he called Mira directly while I was in the room. She put him on speaker, without hesitation. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said. "The board's patience isn't infinite." "Neither is mine," she replied. "You're tying yourself to a variable," he pressed. "People leave." "So do illusions," she said, "and I'm done building those." When the call ended, she sat very still. I waited. "I meant it," she said finally. "About deciding anyway." "I know," I said, "and I'm still here." Weeks slid into each other. The 6-month mark hovered like a distant mountain, visible, inevitable. We started doing things that had nothing to do with the arrangement. Long walks without destination. Late night, movies neither of us finished. We argued once, sharply, about nothing important and everything underneath. She accused me of holding back. I accused her of pushing too hard. We didn't speak for an hour, then made up on the kitchen floor, laughing at how bad we were at pretending this was simple. One night, she woke me from a nightmare. I didn't ask what it was about. I wrapped an arm around her, and she curled into me like she'd been waiting for permission. In the dark, she whispered, "Promise me something." "What?" "If this ends," she said, voice unsteady, "don't let it end quietly. Don't let us pretend it didn't matter." I kissed her hair. "It matters," I said. "Already." The board called another meeting. This one felt different, less probing, more procedural. Decisions were made, clauses invoked. When it was over, Mira walked out with her shoulders lighter than I'd ever seen them. "They're backing off," she said, disbelief edging her smile. "Not completely, but enough." We celebrated with cheap wine and takeout, sitting on the balcony wrapped in blankets. The city lights blinked like a promise that refused to explain itself. Mira rested her head on my shoulder. "I should feel victorious," she said. "Instead, I feel exposed." "Victory will do that," I said. "It removes the excuses." She laughed softly. "You're annoyingly insightful." "I've had practice," I said. As the weeks dwindled, the question grew louder. Friends began to ask what was next. Her mother hinted. My own routine started bending around the idea of permanence. We didn't rush the conversation, but it waited for us everywhere. At the edge of meals, in the silence before sleep. The night before the 6 months were up, the power went out again. We found candles, sat cross-legged on the floor, faces lit with flickering gold. This feels familiar, she said. It does, I agreed. She took a breath. Tomorrow, the clause is satisfied. And tonight? Tonight, she said, meeting my eyes. I want honesty. All of it. I nodded. Me too. We talked until the candles burned low. About fear. About wanting without guarantees. About the risk of choosing someone when you could choose safety instead. When we finished, there was no neat resolution, no final declaration. Just a shared understanding that the decision was no longer theoretical. As dawn crept in, pale and tentative, Mira stood by the window, watching the city wake. Stay, she said again, the word layered now with everything it meant and everything it might cost. I stepped beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of the morning, close enough to answer without rushing, knowing that whatever came next would demand more than a signature or a deadline, and that the hardest part wasn't pretending to be married anymore, but deciding what truth we were brave enough to live with once the pretending was no longer required. Morning arrived without ceremony. The city outside stretched and yawned, buses groaning awake, vendors shouting half-hearted greetings to skies still undecided about the day. Mira stayed by the window, arms folded, watching life continue as if nothing monumental was about to happen. I poured coffee we barely drank, the steam rising like questions neither of us spoke. Her phone buzzed first, then mine. Messages stacked up, formal confirmations, cautious congratulations, reminders that the 6 month had officially elapsed. The clause was satisfied. The invisible clock that had governed our lives for half a year simply stopped. Mira exhaled slowly. It's done, she said. Yes, I replied. It is. She turned to face me, and for a moment she looked younger, almost uncertain, like the woman I'd met in a cafe who had asked for a husband as if asking for shelter from a storm. I thought I'd feel free, she admitted. But freedom feels like standing at the edge of something very wide. Freedom usually does, I said. It gives you room to fall. She smiled faintly. You're not very comforting. I'm honest, I said. You asked for that. She nodded. I did. The day unfolded awkwardly. We went about our routines, but each familiar act felt newly exposed. Folding laundry felt like a question. Making lunch felt like a test. Every glance carried an echo of what could be said and what might happen if it were. In the afternoon, Mira dressed carefully, choosing a jacket she wore only when she needed armor. I have to go in, she said. They'll expect a statement. Some signal. Do you want me there? I asked. She hesitated. I don't know what I want, she said honestly. But I know I don't want to do this alone. I'll come, I said. At the office, the atmosphere was almost anticlimactic. Polite smiles. Carefully neutral congratulations. Arjun watched from across the room, unreadable. When Mira addressed the board, her voice was steady. My marriage fulfilled a requirement, she said. But my work speaks for itself. Any assumption beyond that is yours, not mine. There was a murmur of approval, a vote, a formal acknowledgement of her position and independence. When it was over, Arjun approached her quietly. So, he said, you won. Mira met his gaze. This wasn't a game. He glanced at me. It never is until it is. She didn't rise to it. Take care, Arjun. As we left, my hand found hers without thinking. She didn't pull away. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. Or maybe that was just the absence of a countdown. Back home, evening settled in gently. We ordered food and ate in silence that wasn't uncomfortable, but wasn't settled either. Afterward, Mira stood in the doorway of the bedroom, hesitating like a guest unsure of the rules. We don't have to decide everything tonight, I said. I know, she replied, but we do have to decide something. She sat on the edge of the bed. I've spent most of my life choosing what made sense, what protected me, what looked right from the outside. And now, I asked, and now, she said softly, sense isn't loud enough anymore. I sat beside her. Then don't choose sense. Choose truth. She laughed quietly. You make it sound so simple. It isn't, I said, but it's cleaner. She leaned back on her hands, staring at the ceiling. If I ask you to stay, not as part of a deal, not as performance, what would you be giving up? I considered the question carefully. The comfort of knowing exactly where I stand. I said, the safety of pretending this was temporary. She nodded. That's what I'd be giving up too. We sat like that for a long time, the room darkening around us. Finally, she stood and began to pace. There's something I haven't told you, she said. I waited. When I said I needed a husband by tomorrow, she continued, it wasn't just the inheritance. It was a fear that if I didn't anchor myself to something solid, I'd disappear into expectations that weren't mine. And now, I asked, now I'm afraid of anchoring to the wrong thing, she said, even if it feels right. I took her hand, grounding her pacing. Anchors aren't prisons. I said, they're choices. You can lift them. She searched my face. And if I lift it later, then I'll be hurt. I said honestly, but I won't regret staying. Her breath caught at that. Night deepened. The city lights flickered on one by one, as if marking time we no longer owed anyone. Mira rested her head against my shoulder, exhausted. I don't want to rush, she murmured. Then don't, I said. We're allowed to move slowly now. She closed her eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of a life no longer measured by deadlines or clauses, knowing that tomorrow would bring questions neither of us could fully answer yet, and that whatever came next would not be decided in a single night, but would begin to take shape in the quiet, unfinished space we were choosing to stand in together. The morning that finally changed everything did not announce itself with drama. No sudden revelation, no urgent knock at the door. It arrived quietly, dressed like an ordinary day, and that was how I knew it was real. Mira stood in the kitchen, hair loose, sleeves rolled up, humming without realizing she was doing it. The sound was soft, unguarded, happy in a way that didn't ask permission. She turned and caught me watching her. You're staring, she said. I'm noticing, I replied. She smiled, but this time there was no hesitation behind it, no calculation. Just a woman standing inside a life she had chosen, not negotiated. Later that afternoon, she asked me to walk with her. No destination, no agenda. We wandered through streets we crossed dozens of times before, but today they felt unfamiliar, as if the city itself had been rearranged while we weren't looking. At a small park near the river, she stopped. This is where I decided, she said. Decided what? I asked. That I don't want a life built on escape anymore, she said. I don't want to keep choosing what saves me from fear. I want to choose what asks more of me. I waited. Some truths need silence to land. She took my hands, steady and warm. When I asked you to stay that first night, I didn't know what I was really asking for. I thought I needed a role filled, a problem solved. But somewhere between pretending and surviving, I found something I wasn't prepared for. What? I asked quietly. A partner, she said, not someone who completes me, someone who stands with me. The words settled into my chest, heavy and right. I won't promise forever, she continued. I won't promise perfection, but I will promise honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. I didn't answer immediately. I thought of the letters in the box, of the ways I had learned to leave before being left, of how this woman had walked into my life like a deadline and stayed like a choice. I don't need forever, I said. I need real. Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but with relief. Then stay, she said. Not because you're needed, because you're wanted. I pulled her into me, and for the first time, it felt like arrival instead of collision. The world, predictably, had opinions. Headlines shifted. Rumors bloomed and withered. Some people smiled politely and waited for us to fail. Others surprised us with kindness. Mira faced it all with a steadiness that no longer came from armor, but from clarity. She stopped explaining herself to rooms that didn't listen. She started building things that didn't require permission. We learned each other slowly after that. The real versions. The ones not edited for survival. We argued better. We listened longer. We failed at things and didn't disappear afterward. Love, I discovered, wasn't a dramatic moment everyone waits for. It was the quiet decision to stay present when leaving would be easier. One evening, months later, we returned to the cafe where it had begun. The same burn espresso. The same cracked table by the window. Mira laughed when she saw it. "Do you remember what I said here?" she asked. "I do," I replied. "You needed a husband by tomorrow." She shook her head. "I was wrong." "How so?" "I didn't need a husband," she said. "I needed courage. You just happened to be where I learned how to use it." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You gave me something too," I said. "What?" "A reason not to run." Outside, the rain started again, light and patient, just like the first night. But this time, there was no storm chasing us forward. No clock ticking behind our backs. Just two people who had stopped pretending and started choosing. Later, when the city lights came on and the windows reflected our faces back at us, I realized something simple and irreversible. Love hadn't arrived when we signed papers or crossed lines we'd sworn to respect. It arrived the moment we stopped using each other as shelter and started standing side by side in the open. Mira leaned into me as we walked home, her steps sure, her presence calm. And in that ordinary, extraordinary moment, I understood that the strongest stories aren't built on desperation or rescue, but on two people brave enough to say, without urgency or fear, "I'm here, if you are." And for the first time in my life, that was enough.